Hi, dear Lana. Welcome to your favorite program, The Knowledge Quest. History and Government is the subject. I am your teacher, Alex Obara. I'll just take you through a quick recap of what we discussed in our last discussion, and then connect it to what we'll be discussing today, which is shown on the screen. In our last discussion, we were looking at the social, political and economic organization of the Kenyan communities up to the 19th century, and we were asking and answering the question, how were the Kenyan communities organized before the coming of the Europeans or the colonial masters in the 19th century backward? And we began by discussing or looking into details of the Bantu communities, and we looked at the Agikuyu community, we looked at the Ameru, and we also looked at the Abagusi community. And we looked at the organizations in as far as political, economic, and social organization is concerned. And we were able to discover that each community had a deep and comprehensive organization in those three aspects. And just but to mention, we looked at the social organization and we saw that each community had their own beliefs. They believed in the existence of God. They had their own practices like circumcision for both gender, boys and girls. And we also see that each community had it had a family. They had their family, and those families, when they came together, they formed a clan which had their own structure of leadership. We looked at the political organization and we saw how the power was distributed in each community extensively. And we also looked at the economic organization, and we saw how each community used to make a livelihood through activities like farming, livestock keeping, ironsmithing, activities like trade, and many more. So in our lesson today, we will majorly focus in the Mijikenda. And the Mijikenda is one of the communities or the tribes which make up the Bantu, and they are coastal Bantus. They are majorly found in the coastal area of Kenya, and they are referred to Mijikenda because these are 9 clans which come together to form up the Mijikenda tribe of the coast. And so we will delve deep and look into the social organization of this community and see how they are organized socially, and then later we look at the political, and eventually we look at their economic organization as the last group of the Bantu speakers that we shall be discussing in our subject or in our lesson today. So the social organization, the first one is that this community, the Mijikenda, were organized into clans. And each clan lived in fortified villages called kayas. So in fortified villages, what it means here, that each village was fenced around with some thorny plant, and those villages were referred to as the kayas. All right, so there were several clans, and each clan was surrounded and fenced, and each of them in that case were referred to as kaya, or as we call many of them referred to as kayas. And then number 2, social organization number 2, is that circumcision was carried out once after every 4 years, after which those who were circumcised, or the initiates, who joined an age set. So after being circumcised, they could be allowed to join an age set. And then number 3, they also believed in a god called Mulungu. They believed in a god called Mulungu, or can say they believed in the existence of a supernatural being who is the creator, whom they called Mulungu. And then another social aspect of this community is that they worshipped ancestral spirits, and they also had a prophet. So in some way they believed that once the ancestors had died, they dwelt somewhere in the air as spirits, and therefore they worshipped them. And apart from that also, they had prophets, people who could foretell and foresee the future. So that is the aspect of the social organization of this Mijikenda group in the coast. So let us look at the political organization. And like we said initially, political organization largely has to do with authority and power, power throughout the clan. So the first aspect of the political organization of the Mijikenda is that they had a strong clan system. All right, they had a strong clan system. Remember, we said those clans were fortified, fenced, and put aside to be known as kayas. So they had strong clan system. And then those clan systems were governed by a council of elders. So there were council of elders who were appointed, and those are the ones who governed those given clans. And those council of elders had the following functions. Number one, they settled disputes or disagreements which could come in the community as a result of various disagreements or as a result of conflicts in the society. So they settled those disputes. Number two, the council of elders were the final court of appeal. It was the final court of appeal. So it means that in case there was a case which was not handled anywhere, it was in here that a final decision could be made by the council of elders. Number three, the council of elders also presided over religious matters and ceremonies. Okay, so religious matters and ceremonies included, but not limited to offering sacrifices and, of course, appeasing the spirits, plus many more. So they presided over those religious matters and ceremonies. And then number three, they also had age-set system. Remember, we said the initiates, or those young men who had been circumcised, they were initiated into the age-set system. So this age-set system provided warriors who defended the community from external aggression or external conflicts. So if it happened that the Mijikenda group or community could have issues with their neighboring communities, the age-set system could come in as warriors, and they could provide security and defend their community from those external aggressors. And then number four, the clan system strengthened the bonds of the community. That we said we had those kayas, all right? So that system strengthened the bond in that it brought them together and made them more closer and more united. So it strengthened the bonds of the community. And then lastly, but not least, in political organization, intermarriages between different clans also strengthened their social and political unity. That is to mean that if person A could marry from a given clan, or maybe clan B, in that case, the political bond and unity, of course, unity could be strengthened, and also the social aspect could be strengthened between those two different clans. And that is why we say the clan system in some way strengthened the bonds between these communities. So there was that intermarriages between different clans, from clan A and clan B, which brought together and strengthened their social and political unity. So we will next look at the economic organization, which is to deal with on how they made their daily livelihood. So the Mijikenda, people who live along the coast, number one, they were farmers. Okay, so you realize that the economic activities among the Kenyan communities are not so different. They're like similar and cut across various communities. So the Mijikenda, they were farmers who cultivated a number of crops. For example, they cultivated crops like sorghum, okay, millet, cassava, yams, coconuts, sweet potatoes, and beans. Okay, so these are very common crops in Kenya, and the Mijikenda also cultivated these kind of crops. Okay, so we talk about sorghum, millet, cassava, yams, coconut, sweet potatoes, and beans. Number two, another economic activity of the Mijikenda is that they were also livestock keepers. Okay, that means they kept a number of livestock, including cattle, sheep, goat, which provided them, number one, meat, milk, hides and skins, okay? So it provided them those which they needed for their daily survival, for their livelihood. So they could get meat to eat, milk for their survival, and also hides and skins, which they could exchange with other communities for the sake of their livelihood. And then number 4, remember also these community, they live along the coast. We have rivers along the coast, and also we have the ocean. So they engaged in fishing activities along the coast and on rivers. Okay, so that is another economic activity, that they could get fish, which they could consume, and sometimes they could also sell or rather exchange the fish with other communities who did not produce the fish. The number 4, they participated in coastal trade with Arabs and their Kamba from the interior. Remember, we had the long distance trade which we initially had discussed. So they participated in this coastal trade with the Arabs. Okay, those earlier Arabs who had come and settled in the coast. They could carry out trade with them, and of course you also had the Akamba and other Africans, of course, who are from the interior of Kenya. So there was the aspect of trade, which also is common. Number 5, they mined salt. Okay, so if you go to the coast, there's some part in the north coast whereby salt is mined. And that salt which they mined, they were able to exchange. They exchanged salt with items from other communities who never produced salt, like the Akamba, like the Arabs, and many other communities in the interior of Kenya. And then also another aspect on the economic organization of the UGANDA is that they were also iron workers. That is to mean they were ironsmiths, as they made a lot of equipment from iron. For example, spears, arrows, all right, and hoes which could be used in farming. And then number 7, they also practiced crafts such as basketry, using coconut palms. Okay, so it's very common if you go to the coast, you will be able to get some of the baskets and some of the mats which have been sewed and been made from the coconut palm. So this is an art which was practiced by the UGANDA as an economic activity during the 19th century. Last but not least, they also engaged in hunting and gathering. And in hunting, they could hunt wild game, and also they could gather wild fruits which they used to supplement their diet. So apart from all these other food which they could eat, they could also carry out hunting and gathering to get more food in for the sake of supplementing their diet. So that is the economic organization of the UGANDA, and actually that is the last community which we will look into among the Bantu, and that means we will now proceed to the next language group, which is the Nylots, and we shall delve now into the various tribes among the Nylots and see how these communities were organized in their socio-economic and political organization. So that means we move to our next slide, where we look at the Nylots. The Nylots. And now you remember that when we talked about the Nylots, we say the Nylots, these are people who are believed to have moved along River Nile in their migration into Kenya. Yeah? And we were able to classify, or we were able to categorize the Nylots into different groups. We have the River Lake Nylots, we have the Highland Nylots, and we have the Plain Nylots. So in this case, we'll start with the River Lake Nylots, who are basically the Luo, right? And then we shall be able to look at their organization as far as social, political, and economic organization is concerned. And therefore, it means we'll start with their social organization, the Luo, all right? So the Nylots, we look at the Luo at their social organization. Just to remind you, talking about social organization, it means, or it implies on the organization as far as the interactions were concerned, their belief system, and some of the activities and the cultural beliefs which they had. So the first social aspect of the Luo is that the family was the basic social unit. Okay, so before you move out to the clan or to any other aspect, you realize the family was an important unit because it was the basic social unit in the Luo community. Then number two, members of one clan were not allowed to marry. That means marriage was exogamous in nature. Like we said, exogamous basically implies that you were not allowed to marry from the same clan. It was a taboo. Therefore, it means one had to go outside the clan to marry. So marriage in nature among the Luo community was exogamous in nature. So number three, they believed in existence of a supernatural being or a creator God whom they called Nyasaye, and they had sacred shrines and trees. That means that apart from believing in the existence of this supernatural being or God, creator God, they worshipped also, and they worshipped the God in special places. They worshipped in special places. For example, we said in sacred shrines and trees. All right. And then also number four, we say that the Luo community as a social organization, they honored ancestral spirits. That means that they believed that the ancestors who lived long time ago, once they died, their spirits lived somewhere in the air, and therefore they honored them. And that could be done through some of the rituals which they did, for example, doing libations. That is, before eating, they could pour some food on the ground. All right, that was meant that the spirits will come and pick the food and eat, doing those libation kind of spirits. So they honored ancestral spirits as a form of social organization. Number five, they had religious leaders who performed ritual function. Okay, so some of the functions which were ritually performed included, offering sacrifices to the god. And sometimes when somebody had died, there were some rituals which were supposed to be carried out. So they had those religious leaders whose main function was to perform the ritual functions. And then another social organization of the Luo is that the Luo youth went through initiation at puberty. Okay? And the kind of initiation here, circumcision, initiation they went through was not the common which was carried out among the Bantu, but it involved extraction or the removal of 6 lower teeth, all right, after which they were allowed to marry. So without, that is interesting, if the teeth or the extraction of the 6 lower teeth was not carried out, in that case you did not qualify to be a married person. So there was that initiation from puberty to adulthood, which meant if you count your 6 lower teeth, 1, 2, 3, up to 6, remove them. Then from there now it means you are qualified to enter into marriage. Number 7, they had informal education in the community. They had informal education in the community. That means that girls were set aside and they were taught on how to become responsible women in their adulthood. Young men also were set aside and they were taught education on how to become responsible young men in the community. All right, so that was kind of informal kind of education, and that was a social organization among the Luo. Lastly, but not least, among the Luo, there was division of labor according to the gender and age. All right, so labor among the Luo was divided. That means if you were female, there were some roles that female could do, and if you were male, there were some roles which were assigned to the male gender. So that is the social organization of the Luo community. Very fast, we say number 1, the family was the basic unit, social unit. Number 2, members of one clan were not allowed to marry. That means it was exogamous in nature. They believed in a creator God, who they called Nyasaye, and the Luo honored ancestral spirits. They had religious leaders who performed the rituals, and we say the Luo youth went through initiation at puberty, which involved extraction of the 6 lower teeth, and then from there one could be allowed to marry. They had informal education for male and female, and then lastly we said there was division of labor, which was done according to the gender. So we'll go for a short break at this level, And then when we come back, we'll proceed looking at some of the organization among the Nylots and the Luo and other Nilotic communities. Keep safe and see you then. Welcome back after that break, and now we are proceeding, still looking at the socio, political and economic organization of the Nylots. We have begun with the Luo and we have looked at the socio organization. So our next discussion now will be looking at the political organization of the Luo community. And in this case, we are going to look at how authority and power was distributed among the Luo community. So we'll start with the first point, that the lowest political unit among the Luo was the family, which was headed by a man called Jaduong. All right? So Jaduong was the head of the family, and in that case, you're seeing there's some aspect of power. So it means the father, or in that case, the Jaduong, was at the head of the family. It was the lowest political unity. Of course, below the Jaduong was other, like the mother and the elder children, up to, in that hierarchy, to the least. And then the next in that level of political structure was made up of a lineage of councils, also known as Butch Dot, all right, whose main duty was to settle domestic disputes. So in case there were those disputes which were happening in the family, disagreements, the role of the lineage councils, also known as Butch Dot, they were supposed to settle those disputes. So above Jaduong, we have the Butch Dot, who are lineage councils, who are supposed to solve issues or disputes in the clans. And then number 3, we have several families who came together. So when those families were joined together, they formed a clan, all right? So several families brought together, they formed a clan. And of course, those clan, we had what called a council of elders, as we shall see in number 4. So we have a family, like we said. Then we have, below that family, we have the next political structure, lineage of councils, who are solving family disputes, or domestic disputes and disagreements, like between husband and wife, children and father and all that, those domestic disputes. And then below them, we have now several families joined together. So when those families are joined together, they formed a clan. So within the clan number 4, there existed a council of elders called Doho, right? These were responsible for settling interfamily disputes. That is to mean that if there was a dispute between family A and family B, then it was the role of the Doho to solve those disputes in those interfamily disagreements. And then number 5, the political organization, they had warriors. The warriors were responsible for defending the community and raided other communities. And of course, we shall see that raiding is among the economic activities which was carried out by some of the African communities. So the warriors, under the aspect of politics or political organization, they defended their community from external aggression. And that means that we'll have political stability in their clan. So they also raided their neighbors. Number 6, there was also a grouping of clans, all right? So when these clans were grouped and brought together, they formed what you call UGANDA, all right? UGANDA. So there was also a grouping of all clans called UGANDA, and the council of elders at this level had a representation from each clan called Buchpin. Yeah? So those UGANDA, when they came together, they formed, the clans came together, they formed UGANDA. And then in that UGANDA, we had, of course, a clan elder from each clan, which we call Buchpin, all right? There, Buchpin. So these Buchpin were elders from various clans who formed the UGANDA. So those elders were the ones who were in charge of the UGANDA, and they had several responsibilities, which include all duties. Number one, the settling major inter-clan conflicts. So if there was a conflict between Clan A and Clan B, then it was the role of the Buchpiny to settle those disagreements between the clans. Then they also had a responsibility of declaring war. That means if Clan A and Clan B, or community of the Luo and another neighboring community, let's say for example the Kipsigis or the Abagusi, they could declare war between those two communities or those two different language groups. And then lastly, they punished criminals. Yeah, so those people who broke the moral conduct or who went against the moral conduct of the society, like murderers and thieves, they were punished by the Buchpiny, who are clan elders from various clans who form the Uganda, right? So those are basically the points which note out the political organization of the Luo community. Therefore, it means after looking at the political organization, we now look forward and see, and look next and see on the economic organization. How were the Luo organized as far as the making of their daily livelihood and survival is concerned? So, as we all know, the Luo people are people who live along the they are called river lake Nylots. That means they live along rivers and along the Lake Victoria. So the first economic activity by default of where they live is fishing, all right? Because they live along rivers and lakes. So they carried out fishing along rivers and lakes in Victoria. And of course, you know, these fish were supposed to help them to have food and of course also to exchange to their neighboring communities to get what they never had in return. So they carried out fishing along the rivers in Lake and in Lake Victoria. Of course, these are economic activity which takes place to date. It never ended. Then number two, the Luo, they were a pastoral community, and that means they were livestock keepers. So they kept a number of livestock like cattle, sheep, and goat, which provided them milk, meat, and skin. And of course, those were very important for their social religious value. That means that if somebody had a large number of livestock in some way, that person was regarded as very important in that given community. So it was important also for issues of sacrificing, for issues of carrying out rituals. So the animals were important for social religious values. So apart from also carrying out fishing and being pastoralists, the Luo community, they also carried out farming. They were farmers. They did cultivation of crops, for example, sorghum, finger millet, pumpkins, and cassava. All right, so these are some of the crops which the Luo grew along in their land for purposes of survival in their place. And then number four, the Luo also carried out barter trade. Like we say, barter trade is the exchange of goods for goods. So they carried out barter trade with their neighbors. For example, the Abagusi, they were able to exchange and get from the Abagusi products like grains, spears, arrows, and soapstones, the carvings, soapstone carvings. And the Abagusi in return could also get fish from the Luo. They could get livestock products and baskets from the Luo in return. All right, so there was that aspect of trade among the Luo community. And then another economic organization of the Luo community is that they were craftsmen who made pots. All right, they were craftsmen who made pots, baskets, ornaments, stools, and clothes from goat skin. All right, they also constructed canoes and they built huts. So in other words, they had skills in crafting, art and crafting. So they could make a number of things like pots, baskets, ornaments which could be hung around the hands and feet and around the neck. All right. Then stools. We had clothes which they could make from goat skin. Okay. Then we also had they constructed canoes. These were supposed to be used, of course, in purposes of moving through water and for fishing, and also for transportation. And also they built huts, and of course you realize some of the huts which they built were round grass-thatched house. That was a skill which was very common among the Luo community as an economic organization. Lastly, but not least, the Luo hunted wild animals, and they also gathered fruits, roots and vegetables which were supposed to supplement their diet. Okay, so in other words, we say they were also, apart from being fishermen, apart from being livestock keepers and farmers, we also say they were hunters and gatherers. And the purpose of carrying out hunting and gathering was to supplement, right, to add on top of what they had. So they were supplementing their diet or their food which they consumed. So that is the economic organization of the Luo community in the 19th century. And of course, you realize that some of the activities which they did have still been carried forward, and they are currently doing them. But those are the activities or economic activities they did in the 19th century, before and after the coming of the colonial masters. So having looked at the Luo, we will move into the next Nilotic group, language group, that is the Nandi, right? The Nandi, we'll look at the Nandi, and we will be able to dissect and look into details about the Nandi. So you know the Nandi are among the Kalenjin speaking group of the Highland Nylots, and you can remember how we discussed into detail about the Nandi in our previous discussions. So in this case, our main focus is going to be on how this particular community was organized in their socio-political and economic aspects. And in that case, we shall begin with the social organization. And we will start, and of course you realize that this community, some of the organizations are not so different. They are cutting across. Some differences may be there, but you realize that they're almost similar. So the first social aspect of the Nandi is that the society was clan-based. In other words, the clan was the basic social unit of the Nandi community. All right? So the society was clan-based. And then, number two, the boys and the girls. This is very important. The boys and the girls were initiated into adulthood, and after being initiated, they joined age-set systems. And then from there is when they were allowed to marry. So it was not just anybody who could be married at any age. It was those boys and girls who had been initiated into adulthood from puberty, and that is only when they could be allowed to be married or to marry in that case. Number three, the Nandi also practiced marriage outside the clan. We said this kind of marriage is referred to as exogamous kind of marriage. So they practiced exogamy, that is marrying outside their clan. Then number four, the Nandi also worshipped one god and believed in existence of ancestral spirits. Okay, so they believed in existence of one god, all right, and they believed in ancestral spirits. So that means those are ancestors who at some point died, all right. So they, like we say, they believed their spirits were living somewhere in the air, and therefore they worshipped and they believed in the existence of those ancestral spirits. And then another important social aspect of the Nandi is that they had important religious leaders. They had very important religious leaders. For example, the medicine men, the diviners, the rainmakers, and prophets. That means these were people who were specially endowed with these gifts of medicine. So it means they were special men who could heal people who were having some sicknesses, who were having some complications. We had medicine men. We had people who were diviners, who could be able to foresee and foretell. We had rainmakers, people who could be consulted in times when there was no rain, and they could pray and in some way make their sacrifices, and there was rain. those who are rainmakers and prophets who could foretell the future. And then lastly, but not least, on the social aspect, the Orkoiyot was regarded as a spiritual leader. The Orkoiyot was regarded as a spiritual leader and a diviner. That means there were some important ceremony activities which the Orkoiyot participated as the overseer. So those are the points which we can look at the social organization of the Nandi community among the Kalenjins. So having looked at the social organization, I want us next to look into the political organization. The political organization. So political organization, the basic political unit among the Nandi was the family, all right? So the family was the basic political unit. And many related families formed a neighborhood, also called Koko, all right? I think for those ones who are probably come from this community could pronounce it well, but Koko was several families that came together and formed a neighborhood, okay? And then several Kokwet, so those Koko, when they came together called Kokwet, they formed Bororiet, all right? So several Kokwet, when they came together, they formed a Bororiet, which was held by a council of elders, okay? So the council of elders' duties included the following, but not limited to them. They were, number one, they maintained law and order. They maintained law and order. That means in case there were people who intended to break the law, it was the role of the council of elders to ensure that such people are summoned and disciplined and told to keep the law. And then also, the council of elders settled major disputes. That means there were some disputes which were not very major. Those could be settled back in the village and back in the family. But if there were major disputes which needed the intervention of the council of elders, then they could handle such kind of disputes. And then also, they were the final court of appeal. That it means that there was no case which was to be handled above the council of elders. So if they gave a ruling, they were the final court of appeal in case or in terms of settling disputes among the community people. And then lastly, not last, but another aspect or role of a duty of the council of elders is that they negotiated for peace and declared war. That is to mean that sometimes communities would have disagreements. Sometimes communities could disagree over issues like grazing land. They could disagree on issues like territorial integrity and all that. So in such cases, you realize that the council of elders could negotiate for peace, and if peace was not an option, then they could go ahead and declare war between various communities which were having conflicts. And then another function of the council of elders among the Nandi was to advise warriors on when to organize raids. Okay? Remember we said that raiding was one of the economic activities, and as we shall see. So they could advise the young men, the warriors, on when and how to carry the raiding, since they were, experienced in as far as raiding is concerned and such kind of activities. And then lastly, but not least, the council of elders presided over ceremonies, all right? So in case there was a ceremony which was carried out among the Bantu, the Nandi community, the council of elders presided over those ceremonies. So the next point under political organization is that after circumcision, young men joined junior warriors. They joined junior warriors who defended the community from outside attack. All right, so those we call them external aggression. We call them external aggression. So in case there was an external aggression from any other community, it was the role of these young men who had joined the HSET system to defend the community from such kind of aggression. Another organization is that they also had an office of Orkoyot, yeah, who acted as a spiritual leader and political. And remember we said in social organization, we say that the Orkoyot was a spiritual leader. So in this case also, there was that office of the Orkoyot who acted as a spiritual and political leader. So the functions of the Orkoyot among the Nandi family or the Nandi community included the following. Number one, he presided over religious functions. Okay, so if there were functions which were religious in nature, it was the role of the Orkoyot to preside over such functions. Number two, he advised the council of elders on running of the community. All right, so there were some issues which were, above the wisdom of the council of elders. So in that case, they would consult with the Orkoyot, and he will advise them on how the community was supposed to be run. And then number three, he advised and blessed warriors before or during wars. Okay, before raids or wars. So if these young men were supposed to go and of course carry out raids or wars, the work was to bless them, all right? I think maybe he was laying hands on them and probably, doing some chanting and all that. So he blessed those warriors before they went out for raiding, so that if they went for raiding, they could come back successfully, or if to go out for war, even if they die, they don't die in large numbers, okay? Or if complete, they don't die. So he advised and blessed them. And also the next role or function or duty of the Orkoyot is that he arbitrated in cases of disputes between clans. All right, so we had these different clans. Of course, we call them the Kokwet. So those Kokwets, when there was a disagreement between one and another, he is the one who arbitrated peacefully, so these people could come and talk and solve their disputes or disagreements. He also had the power to foretell the future. As on that duty, he would foretell the future of things which are likely to happen in the future. And then also he acted as a rainmaker and a medicine man, all right? So rainmaker in this case, it means he could, in some way carry out sacrifices and all that, and then we'll have rain. And of course, medicine man, it means that he had that endowed ability of, treating and healing people who had issues or maladies. And then lastly, he acted as a political leader and was consulted. He acted as a political leader and was consulted on matters of transfer of power, okay, from one age group to the other. So in case there was need to transfer power from one age group to another, it was the role of the Orkoyot to be consulted. So that marks the end of our discussion today as far as the social, political, and economic organization is concerned. In our next lesson, we will look at the economic organization of the Nandi, which is posted on your screen, so that when we come back in our next lesson, we shall be able to go through them and then move to the next community among the Nylots. So until then, God keep you safe and see you next time.